I'm Judd Simmons, and I am running for county assessor. I have lived in Yavapai County for 38 years. Grew up in the Prescott area. Graduated from Prescott High School and then NAU with a bachelor's degree in business. Met my wife, Carrie, shortly after graduation, and we've been married 21 years. She's a small business owner, and we have 2 teenage boys. I'm proud to be a Republican. My parents are the major reason I have conservative Republican values. My dad was a highly decorated Marine who served in Vietnam, and I followed in his footsteps as I believe in limited government, low taxes, and a strong military. I'm also an avid supporter of the Second Amendment, and like my dad, I'm a life member of the NRA. Matter of fact, I recognize many of you from the NRA banquet a few weeks ago. And I have to say, I've been going to that dinner for over 20 years, and I finally won my first gun. As a matter of fact, I won 2 guns that night, so I was pretty happy about that. My mom was a business owner, and from her I learned the importance of hard work and a good education. I also learned that there's no shortcuts to success. The first question you should be asking yourself is whether or not I am qualified to be your county assessor. And I'm here to tell you that I have the knowledge and experience to assume the roles of this office. I've been a licensed real estate appraiser for the past 18 years and own and operate my own appraisal company. In that time, I've appraised thousands of properties throughout Yavapai County. I'm also a licensed realtor and a good understanding of market trends in our community. And as a manager of a commercial office building and homeowner, I have an appreciation for what it means to be a property taxpayer. My opponent wants you to believe that she is better qualified because she has an extra appraisal certification. Well, let me put this notion to rest. Paul Peterson is the assessor of Maricopa County, the largest assessor's office in the state. This office has more than 1.6 million parcels on its tax rolls. That's 10 times the amount of Yavapai County. And you know what? Mr. Peterson is not a certified residential appraiser, and Mr. Peterson is not a certified general appraiser. As a matter of fact, he's doing a great job for Maricopa County. He was just, he was re-elected with 70% of the votes. So as you can see, I am more than qualified for this office. Next question you should be asking is, why am I running? Well, I'm running because I love what I do. I love meeting new people. I love the challenge of appraising. I also deeply care about this community. This is where I grew up. This is where I'm raising my family. And this is where I will retire. I believe my skills and passion for my profession are best served among the people. And I know I can do a great job representing the people of Yavapai County. And more importantly, I will restore confidence to the office of assessor. Well, you may be asking yourself, what do I mean by restore confidence? Well, this election is about public trust. Over and over, my opponent has violated your trust by either breaking or ignoring the law during the performance of her duties as your elected assessor. Now, there are 4 examples that are documented in public records. First, the grazing land case. Second, the nepotism case. Third, the unregistered lobbyist case. And 4, abuse of hiring practices. Let me elaborate. First, in the grazing land case, my opponent failed to follow the law when she plucked a number out of thin air to more than triple land values. Now, these aren't my words. These are the words of the judge in this case. And her actions have cost the taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal costs. Second, my opponent broke the state's anti-nepotism laws when she hired a relative to work in the office. This crime resulted in financial gain for her family. This is not my opinion. This is documented in court's records and by the deferred prosecution agreement that she signed. Third, my opponent ignored Arizona's lobbying laws when she sent someone in Phoenix to lobby for legislation. My opponent failed to register this person as a lobbyist. This too is a crime. My opponent was not charged with a crime, but when she was warned by the Attorney General's Criminal Division that any future action will not be tolerated. Lastly, for a period of 5 years, my opponent bypassed the county's competitive hiring practices. In that time, 65% of the people hired for full-time positions in her office ignored the county's competitive hiring procedures. So you have to ask yourself, why did this happen? Who were these people that got special treatment? And why wasn't the public given an opportunity for these jobs? My opponent has had her chance to earn your trust, and she has failed. When I'm elected assessor, I will never violate your trust. In closing, my 3 commitments to you are: I will restore confidence to the office of assessor. I will respect you because the assessor works for you, and I will follow the law. I would sincerely appreciate your support and your vote. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, very nice, and now I'm going to introduce our incumbent, Assessor Pam Pearsall.
It's okay, Mom. It's okay. Ouch, that really stung. I'm shocked. Anyways, I'll go with my speech, and then I will comment on the things I just heard.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
No, not very loud.
I can't get any closer. Can you hear me now? Is there a way to turn it up? Pat, if you can't hear me, let me know. Professional, fair, non-politics. That's how I ran the assessor's office since I took office. So who am I? I'm a 3rd generation Arizonan. I was born here. My mom was born in Arizona. My mom was raised in Yarnell. I was a Cub Scout leader when my children were 8 years old and in Cub Scouts. I was a Girl Scout leader when my girls were 12 to 18, like Girl Scouts. I was a Young Women's leader when they were older. Primary leader, I'm a mother, wife, grandmother, babe. I support the right to life, like most Republicans. I volunteered at Birthline for years. I support the right to bear and carry arms. I believe I'm the only candidate that was a victim of a violent crime that included a gun. I don't blame the gun, I blame the possessor of the gun. I was also a victim of a violent crime with a knife. Again, I don't blame the knife. I blame the person that had possession of that knife. But more importantly, none of that really matters. Math is done the same way by somebody that's an NRA member, a Right to Life member. I do the math the same way for everyone because math is easy. Math is math. If you're the assessor and you're doing math and you're not giving favors to anyone, it prevents the tax shift. If somebody gets a favor, they don't pay the taxes that they need to pay, the rest of us do. Because schools get the same amount of money. All taxing jurisdictions get their money. And so when you don't do favors and you just do math fairly, you offend some people that are used to getting favors. In fact, if you're an assessor and you haven't made anybody mad, I would say you haven't done a good job as the assessor. I'm a level 2 appraiser through the Department of Revenue, as I sure that Paul Peterson is, because I certified the tax roll. In addition to that, I'm a general certified appraiser through the Arizona Board of Appraisal. It's a financial board now. That means that I can appraise anything from vacant land to high rises. In addition to what the Department of Revenue is registered to me to do, I'm dual licensed. I had a real estate license back when I was 18, but that was expired a long time ago. So why is it important that your assessor knows what they're doing? What does the assessor do anyways? Well, the assessor values all properties within the county, and then they classify what the property is being used for. And it's a very technical job. You do a lot of math. So an example, when I took office as the assessor 8 years ago, I discovered a few things. Now remember, our prior assessor was not a general certified appraiser. He was, I believe, a level 2 through the Department of Revenue, might have been level 1. So some of the things I discovered, check this out. If you're in a house that's average, 1,500 square feet on an average lot, you know, your Formica countertops, just average, comp roof, you get a value from the assessor's office. When I took office, if you were above average, we classified you as 4. You got a tile roof, maybe you got some ceramic tile, you're a little better than average. The mathematical model that the assessor's office was using, the computer-assisted mass appraisal system that the assessor's office was using, calibrated that if you were 3 average, you were more valuable than if you were 4. Every person in Yavapai County that was living in an average house was valued higher than their identical neighbors that were a little nicer. I took office and I thought, well, if anybody knows that that doesn't make sense, if I live in a house and the only difference is my neighbor has a better house, why would they be valued less? Well, I knew the answer. You know why? Because I understand math and I'm a general certified appraiser. I understood exactly what was going wrong with that mathematical model. I'm not going to tell you because if you come up with a question and answer, I'd like to ask my opponent first. I fixed that my first year. That's not going to happen anymore. Another thing I discovered was that grazing agricultural value property and farming land had not been updated in over 30 years. That flew in the face of the statutes. We were supposed to be doing a lease study, and we were supposed to be updating those values every single year. Now the real lawsuit, the one that would have really cost Yavapai County money, is if the Chamber of Commerce had gotten together and said, look, why is our commercial property being updated every year, but your ag property is not? And we would have had to face that lawsuit. We would have had to explain, why is a tire store in a corner being updated every year, but a ranch is being ignored? Well, I updated those values, and surprisingly, some people got upset, and there was a lawsuit. And they lost that lawsuit. And by loss, I don't mean that I won. Anybody that goes to court knows you don't know what's going to happen. It was a compromise decision. They said, Pam, your expense sheet, this is one of the things he brought up. Your expense sheet, not the value, your expenses were plucked out of the air. That was absolutely not true. We had an expense study, and either our lawyer failed to move it into evidence, or the judge forgot it was in evidence. But we had studied expenses and we had used a factor of 10%. At any rate, the judge said that 756 was too low. And he said $25 an acre he thought was too high based on the evidence that he was looking at. And he came in with a difference. At $10 was $9 one year, 10 the next. Well, the people weren't happy and they filed an appeal, and they lost that appeal. And so there's still a couple outstanding cases, but I'm sure it's going to be settled. Let's see, where am I? Oh, so I faced some really interesting things as the assessor. Now I told you how I think being a general certified appraiser and a level 2 appraiser has really prepared me for the job as assessor. But I want to tell you, actually, a lot of my experience had to do with being a Cub Scout leader and a primary leader, because it was like dealing with kindergartners when you deal with the staff. It is amazing to deal with government employees. One time I found somebody taking a little nap under her desk, and it was not a break. Another time, we discovered, oh, you're not even gonna believe this. We discovered a girl, well, a woman, she was in her 40s. She had a baby chicken, and she thought, well, my chicken's sick today. What's the best thing that an adult woman would do with a baby chicken that works for the county? She decided the best thing was stick that chicken in her bra and come to work anyways. So she comes to work with a sick chicken in her bra. Later got discovered washing out her bra, because you can imagine what happened. And we were not even allowed to fire her because you work for the government. So we have disciplined employees and taken care of that, and that has been challenging. But But that brings me to this point that for 8 years, I've managed a budget that's been over, well, right around $3.5 million, and about 60 employees. And that takes a lot of experience to really get the flow of how to stay on top of employees, document things, because by the time it's time for them to go, you better have it documented. When I took office, I studied what's the best thing that the assessor's office could do to show the public that we're doing things the way they're supposed to be done. And I discovered there's an award that the International Association of Assessing Officers give. It's called the Certificate of Excellence. Less than 1% of all jurisdictions in the world have earned this. It's a big deal, and in Arizona, not one assessor's office has ever earned it. So I decided, let's do that. If we're doing that, then we're doing everything right. And it took 6 years of constant work to finally achieve that, with amazing staff and a constant focus on where we wanted to be. We went through every policy, we went through every workflow, and we created a report. We submitted it to the International Association of Assessing Officers, and we've been told that our office runs according to their best practices, and we will be receiving this award August of 2016. It's a big deal. We'll actually be walking on the stage. All the assessors in the conference across the world will clap, and they're going to give us a great big plaque that says, you are running according to best practices for IAAO. Then they take the report, and it's big like a book, and they give it to the next jurisdiction asking, how do we achieve this? And we will be their mentor and their example on how you run an assessor's office. It's an absolutely amazing thing. We're very proud of it. When I took office, the law for agricultural was that if you bought a piece of land that had not been used for agriculture, it had to be in use 7 out of the last 10 years. Well, a lot of people came and they said, that makes it impossible for the little guy to actually get started. You know, think of grapes in the Verde Valley. You buy land, you have to farm it for 7 years before the assessor will give it ag. So we worked with the people that wanted to have change, and that was successfully changed in 3 out of the last 5 years. And that was with the assessor's help. I told you how we updated agricultural values after at least 30 years of not being used. The truth is, we don't know when they were updated, because our records go back to 1986, and they've been 756 since 1986. We suspect ag hadn't been updated since the 70s. Well, I learned a lot since then about ranching and farming, and one of the things I learned was, is it fair that somebody in Wickenburg that's just ranching on rocks and gravel get the same per acre value as somebody that's ranching on the Verde Valley with nice lush grass? Clearly that wouldn't be equitable. So we changed the way we look at ag, and we now do it on an animal unit carrying capacity. So, you know, it might average $25 an acre, but if you only carry 1 cow, it's $3 an acre, and if you can only carry 8 cows in the whole section, it'd be the $24 an acre. So we changed it to that. I think we're doing a lot better on our ag. What I would like to do, if you continue to have me as your assessor, is I'd like to change this calendar, and of course that would take the state legislature, but the assessors would like to work together and change this 18-month calendar. I send you a value in February, and October for next year you'll pay taxes on it. I'd like to change that to a 1-year calendar. Send you a value in February, and in October the same year, you pay your taxes on it. A lot simpler. All the assessors support that bill. And right now, Yavapai County has marijuana growers. We have farmers that grow marijuana for medical purposes. Well, big surprise. Well, so what do you think the assessors should do? Should we value that and classify it as ag? Should we classify that as commercial? Or should we classify that as a exempt from property taxes? Well, this is the law I'd like to change right now. Is right now, if they're a medical marijuana grower, we classify them as commercial. That means more property taxes to the jurisdictions. And not one marijuana grower has complained about that across the state of Arizona yet. But the Assessors Association has met. We've spoken to the Department of Revenue. And for a fact, we understand that the law says to be allowed to grow medical marijuana, it has to be for medical reasons, and it has to be a nonprofit. That means if one of those medical marijuanas came to an assessor and say, hey, we're a nonprofit, we're for medical reasons, and we're a nonprofit, should we be exempt from property taxes? The legalist opinion is yes, they would be exempt from property taxes completely. Not one is asked, but I'd like to get clarity in the statutes to say that that could never happen. So if you elect me, we'll be working on that. I told you about property taxes and property tax shifts and how important it is that your assessor be fair. It wasn't personal to go after ag. I like steak. I like cowboys. I'm from Arizona. It was just about being fair and equitable. Sitting there for 30 years, not being touched, was not fair. So that's why I did it. But my opponent has made some really mean accusations. He said that I plucked a number out of the air. Again, I told you that was the judge was talking about the expense ratio, not the lease study, not the update. And I did have that, and I would share it with anybody what our expense study was, if it was submitted or not. I also have some papers, anybody that's interested. At another forum, he said that I didn't talk enough to the ranchers to let them know what's going on. Gretchen Crosetta actually does a newsletter, and she had written a newsletter for the ranchers on the presentation that I did. And anybody that wants a copy can read it. While I tripled property values, their taxes didn't triple because of the way the limited property value works. And this outlines exactly how property taxes work. I think a lot of people were afraid. That's unfortunate. I think I just heard that I was guilty of nepotism. If anybody remembers, I said I never hired my daughter. I pled innocent. I never hired my daughter. And the case was dismissed, and I agreed that the case could be dismissed. I also, in addition to that, said, look, my daughter lives in Texas. When her husband, who's in the Air Force, was in Afghanistan or Kuwait, she came and visited me. And because I actually work at the assessor's office more than 40 hours a week, I would have liked to spend some time with her. So she would come and volunteer for me. She would file, she would scan, she'd do stuff. And she didn't get paid, she was a volunteer. Then her husband would come back, she'd go back. Then her husband would get called out again, she'd come back and visit me. I thought that worked out really good. In fact, a friend of mine who was an appraiser hired her to type some reports, and she made some money to offset her travels. Later, the office manager said, hey, I have a job and your daughter's here volunteering, can I hire her to do that? And I said, yeah, I think that's a good idea. Which that was not a very good statement of mine. I thought it was a good idea as long as HR is okay with it, I'm okay with it. She gets paid for her work, and there she is. The office manager, so I did hire her, the office manager hired her, and HR approved it. So now when everything comes up, and if you recall, it comes up at about the same time as I'm trying to get rid of an employee and save the county money. I was trying to eliminate the county administrator's wife's position, which did get saved. But right around that time, this complaint, all this happens. So I pleaded and said, no, think about it from my husband's point of view. $750 fine twice, because she got hired twice. And I could plead guilty, and it's less than tipping over a cow. It's a misdemeanor, tipping over a cow. $1,500, it's on my record, move on. But I told my husband, I'm not pleading guilty because I'm not a criminal. I don't tip over cows, I don't go through red lights. I follow the law. And he's like, okay, do what you want. So I plead innocent because I'm innocent. And then they're going to dismiss the case, and I say, let's just make her a volunteer so nobody can ever come back and say, I broke the law. I'll pay back everything she earned, and she can be a volunteer from that time. So I paid $6,000 for what she had earned. I could have paid $1,500 for the fine, but instead I'll plead it, don't take me to Mexico to buy anything. I'm not good at doing. I paid $6,000. Let Japan that vacuums in straight lines. Doesn't even speak English. So from my husband's point of view, I spent over $7,000 just so nobody would say I am that type of person that would do it, which I didn't. I absolutely did not break the law. I did not fire my daughter. I wouldn't do something like that. She was a volunteer. And I have checks to show you that I paid that money. You know, but people make mistakes. That's why the county gives us HR and county attorneys and stuff like that to lead me and guide me. Oh, he said something about an unregistered lobbyist and I'm not being prosecuted but I'm guilty. Whatever. I don't know. People can file complaints against elected officials all day long. Didn't do it, don't know what he's talking about. It's ridiculous. And abuse of hiring practice, it's all okay, this is how I do it. Or how I used to do it. You're gonna get the job because you worked for the county for 15 years. I'm gonna promote you and get the job. Really? Am I gonna go post that job, let people go buy new clothes, come, they interview, and they have no chance to get it because I'm gonna promote you. I just promote you and then I post a job that leaves. I think it's mean to post a job that nobody has a chance of getting because I already identified an employee in the office that's going to get it. I believe in promoting within. Got to be licensed from the department. It saves money. Really, I'm going to contact HR. We're going to pay that clerk whatever per hour. They're going to post it. Then I'm going to pay employees to sit there and ask you, what's the square root of 49? And what's this? You're going to answer and be so proud of yourself in your new dress. You're going to leave, and then you're going to get a phone call. We went another way. We hired someone else. When I knew 2 weeks ago you were never going to get that job. So 65% of the time, Pam hired within, voted within, identified who was going to get the job, and didn't trick people. You know, now, Judd, I do that. I post all jobs. And so if you see a job posting, you might not be getting it. So anyways, I want you to vote for me. I want to be the assessor. My husband says, why? It hasn't been as much fun as I thought it would be. It's because I want to serve you. I know that I can do math. I know what that office looked like. I know where we are now. I know how employees act now. I know that we are the cream of the crop in the world. I know I forgot to tell you. You're now fired. That's another reason why you want an assessor that knows what they're doing. They literally burned down. 1,700 parcels had to be reappraised right now. We usually have the 18 months to appraise them. You needed a leader. I called Colorado assessor. I said, how did you do this similar thing? He sent me checklists. We went down there. I put my boots on and my jeans on, and I helped those appraisers do 1,700 appraisals. Am I running out of time? And the before value and the after value is what the federal government comes up with. It's really important. It's not a game. Anyways, if you'll have me, I'd be honored to continue to serve you.
Thank you, Pam. All right, now we're going to do a little question and answer. Now, we have a couple of rules. Okay, a couple of rules. If you're from one of the campaigns, you can't ask questions. Okay? So that just keeps it fair. And the only other thing I would ask, you can ask any question you want, but just be civil and polite. Okay? And don't pontificate. Ask a question. So, all right, here we go. And
Pam, just a question of information. What are the currency of the property taxes for the current owner of the fairgrounds out in Prescott Valley?
I have heard that it's in bankruptcy again. He has not paid his property taxes for at least 2 years, and personal property taxes may be longer.
Thank you.
any more questions?
They got all the answers.
Anybody got a question? Yes, in the back. Yes, sir, Mr. Pendergast.
I'd like to know from each of you how you feel about Prop 13 Arizona.
Why don't you just take it? Sit there.
So you referring to 117?
Prop 13.
And I'm not familiar with that one, Joe. What is that? Please explain that one.
They're collecting signatures to put on the ballot. A copy of the California Prop 13, which sets, California, I'm familiar with, sets your taxes at 1% of purchase value with a maximum increase of your taxes of 2% per year.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, Joe. I know we had the one that passed, the 117 passed a few years ago that maximizes at 5% a year. I didn't realize that California was, we're having another one coming up.
And they call it Prop 13, even though it'll probably get a different number.
Okay,
I
well,
think Pam is familiar with it.
Joe, I will look into it for you.
So, right, then reverse behind it is Arizona Prop 13. It's based on California's Prop 13. I don't think they'll get the signatures this year. So they've been trying to pass Arizona Prop 13 for at least 8 years, because when I ran the first time, they were trying to get other signatures. When I ran the first time, I said I supported Arizona Prop 13, and that's because our property system I didn't like. And for anybody that's not familiar, it takes your sales price, and that's your new value. And it stays at sales price value until you sell it, and then the new owner gets the new value. After that, Arizona Prop 13 came back, and I said I didn't support it, and that was because we were in a declining market, and at that time they did not have a provision for a decline. So if you froze a $500,000 house for $500,000, and that was worth $300,000, I was concerned I got to put on the tax rolls as $500,000. So I didn't support it then. Recently, I talked to Lynn, and she said there is a provision for a decline. And so I'd like to really look at what the bill is, because in the last 8 years, we passed, what my opponent said, Prop 117. And that changed property taxes, your taxable value can only go up a maximum of 5%. And all your taxes are calculated on that. So I'd like to do a compare and contrast to see what the needs are before I took a stand. And that's what they got the signatures, which I don't think they're going to.
Anybody else? In the back.
Yes, Jim Parker. For both of the candidates, most of us in the room here are in favor of smaller government. Going forward, what would each of you look at in terms of making the assessor function having a smaller government footprint in the future?
Well, good question. Of course, when I become your assessor and have a chance to evaluate the office, of course, the success of any organization depends on its people and its procedures. And when I have a chance to evaluate those departments and procedures, I will, make the decision to cut where it needs to be cut, hire and fire people when they need to be, when it needs to be. But I'm in agreement with you that I am for a lean department and a lean government. Thank you.
I think through technology, we're all going towards technology. So in the assessor's office, there are vendors that offer flyovers where they can fly over certain areas. And then on our monitors, we can actually measure. And by law, we're supposed to look at each property once every 4 years. We don't do that well enough by the time we don't have enough employees. But with pictometry, we can move that to 1 every 5 years is how we do it. And you save on gas, wear and tear in cars. In fact, we've eliminated 6 cars with the help of the Board of Supervisors. And the gas, wear and tear in tires, gas, things like that. You still have to go look at properties, because sometimes people file a complaint and they say, my house doesn't have the quality of construction you think it does, or you've mismeasured, or sometimes trees are in the way. But I think we really could move towards also handheld devices. Instead of driving out, doing your inspection, coming back, putting in the computer, we could send the appraisers that have to go to inspections with handouts and they can just do it. So when you look at the cost of technology, I think we're almost there. Especially, I think in the next 5 years you'll be able to see a lot of automated functions.
Can I ask a question of the supervisor?
Of the supervisor?
Yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
I can probably just yell at you.
No, you don't. Wait for the microphone so other people can.
Okay, this is a question for the supervisor, county supervisors in the room. I would like to know how much the county is spending on some of these lawsuits. Not just the one with the agriculture, but any other lawsuits, because we, the taxpayers, are assuming the cost of these lawsuits.
I'm not trying to avoid your question. Let me start, but I'm going to have to give it as a qualification because these lawsuits are ongoing, and there's only certain things we can talk about in public in regards to these lawsuits. However, you have to, in any business, as many of you are business owners know, is that you have to take a look at what do I gain if I do this, but what is it going to cost me? And the question is should the cost be so overwhelming they're really going after people for certain things is really a waste of money in the long run. So we have some pending lawsuits currently with Drake Cement regarding personal property. This is the second time we've had to go in court in regards to their personal property assessment. They're saying one thing, the assessor says something different. Cattleman is threatening another lawsuit, pretty much the same thing as the previous lawsuit of being their net asset values are saying are higher than what they should be. And what's the other one? I know there's another one. Oh, Transwestern Pipeline. Well, Transwestern really has nothing to do with the county except that it runs through our county. Transwestern is suing again because they feel that the Department of Revenue has overstated what their values are on their pipeline and what goes through their pipeline. Bad part about this, the last time we lost this lawsuit, didn't cost the county anything other than refunding the amount of taxes that had already been collected. Bad part of that is a lot of small districts got nailed in the rears after they had already formed their budgets and got hit really hard. Two of them being Seligman and Ashford, because that's where the T intersection of the pipeline exists, and almost destroyed their school districts. See, Karen and I and Steve Pierce went up, had meetings with them to try and mitigate some of this, but the state wasn't hearing it. So we felt that, well, if they get through this one, we loan them some money to help them get through the time period, they're paying it back, and sure enough, we turn around and get hit again. Same thing. Same identical thing from the Department of Revenue. Overestimation of the taxes that are supposedly being paid. The possible, and this is, it hasn't been adjudicated yet, but the possible impact to the school districts is nearly 10% of their budgets. And this is some of the smaller fire districts in Mare, all the way up Dewey Humboldt, all the way wherever that pipeline leads, that they'll have the impact. The school districts as well, the county overall probably $300,000 or $400,000. So that's a major impact. So we don't know where it's going. We aren't sure yet because it's just started. My understanding, somebody mentioned earlier that the AG's office is trying to negotiate a settlement, so we'll see what happens. That's about the best I can tell you for right now. But you got to remember, lawsuits, sound great. You're going to win on principle. But if you can win on principle and lose the war, so you don't want to have to spend 20 times what you're recovering. So.
Can I ask the board of supervisors a question?
Sorry.
I just want to ask if does the assessor just go out and get her own attorney, or does the board of supervisors vote to go forward with the lawsuit? Or do you guys make a decision on getting an attorney for these lawsuits?
Good question. Good question. The board of supervisors, the assessor, let's say, is entered into in a lawsuit. She comes to the board of supervisors and asks for attorney representation. In the case of Cattleman, that's what occurred, I think it was 2011. So it was the previous board. Previous board authorized her to, basically go out and hire a specific lawyer to represent the county in that particular lawsuit. That lawsuit took a lot of time, cost a lot of money, a lot recovery, and a judgment that came down far less than what the assessor thought. Now, this lawsuit, Calvin's, basically it's on the same idea, except it's going to be for the net asset value determination determined by the assessor. This last February, I believe, right, Pam? The NAVs from last February? Okay, well, whatever. So, we don't know where that's going and how it's going to be handled, but we've already taken in representation, outside attorney, because the county attorney has been disqualified from being representative of the county. So, does that answer your question?
Can I respond real quick? Okay. So with lawsuits, the assessor values properties, classifies properties, and then anybody can file a lawsuit and say, I think you got it wrong. And then the assessor can't say, well, we're going to go to court. The board of supervisors has to say, we're going to go to court or we're not going to go to court. And we can't talk about executive sessions, but in an executive session, I would come in possibly if I'm invited, and I would say, I think here's our evidence, and this is why I feel comfortable with that being. On top of that, in our board's case, we could have had a county attorney represent us, and it wouldn't have been that expensive, but our county attorney couldn't represent us because she was conflicted out. She was part of the lawsuit. She has her ranch in the lawsuit. So because the county attorney couldn't represent us, we had a decision: one, just settle, or two, go to court and get an attorney. And that was the board of supervisors' decision. Now, because that lawsuit was filed, the assessor's office went through every parcel number to make sure, one, are they ag? Two, did we make a mistake? Three, is there an improvement on this property that has escaped the tax rolls? And we found millions and millions of dollars of property that had been not accounted for in the tax rolls because they built without a permit. So that more than offset any taxes coming from that. We'll get it every year, than the cost. And then there was Phoenix Cement. Now, it's not necessarily the assessor says this, and Phoenix Cement says this, because on business personal property, it's self-reported. So they literally reported their values and then changed their mind about what the values were. We went to court. The judge gave us a $30 million increase one year and a $35 million increase the next year, and then they appealed. And now we're fighting about what that appeal decision meant. But what I want to say is, I get $3.5 million budget. If the board of supervisors decides to hire an attorney because whatever reason, it comes out of my budget. And so, just like your household, something comes up that you didn't expect, you have to cut back on other parts so that you can afford this lawsuit. So it wasn't a bump to the taxpayers that they had to pay more. It was a bump to my budget that I had to be more fiscally responsible.
In a couple of these responses to the assessors, the word net has come up. And I don't understand what net asset value means on real property. If I have a mortgage that is 90% of the value of my property, do I only get taxed on the other 10%? That's not the way it would be.
What was the question, Roger?
The question is, we were talking about taxes based on net asset value.
Right.
Real property has an assessed value. If I hold a mortgage, I have mortgaged it, and I personally own 10% of it. The other 10% is owned by the bank. Do I only get taxed on 10% or the 100%?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Roger, I don't understand what you're asking. Of course, I am at a disadvantage because I am not in the assessor's office yet. But believe me, when I get in there, I will understand all of this.
So I think the word was net assessed value, and we're not talking about your equity. I know that because of your position, that's what you're looking at. The assessor's office creates polygons, and we put assessor parcel numbers on every polygon, and that's, you live here, here's your assessor parcel number. We also create larger polygons for school districts. So everything in the boundary of a school district has this polygon, and all the properties located in this polygon is the value that that school is going to levy against or tax against. And I send them a report called the net assessed values, and it's saying the assessed values all added together. So you're a church, I might say your full cash value is 100,000. Your net assessed value would be 0 because you're exempt. And that number basically goes in an Excel spreadsheet with all the parcel numbers in that polygon, and that's called the NAV report, the net assessed values. And so when, I think when Supervisor Brown was talking about trends pipeline, he was talking about how it affected the NAV, their report, because it's a huge impact. And again, the assessor has nothing to do with that pipeline that was